The stadium was built to prove him wrong. 100,000 seats, stone pillars, banners draped in red and black. The year was 1936. Berlin, the loudest government in the world, had invited the planet to watch what it believed was destiny. Proof that one race, one nation, one vision of humanity stood above all others. This wasn't just sport. This was a performance, and every detail had been rehearsed. The flags, the uniforms, the marching, the speeches, all of it leading to one simple message: we are superior. Now imagine this. Into that stadium walks a 22-year-old black man from Alabama, the grandson of enslaved people, a man who, back home in America, still couldn't stay in every hotel or eat at every lunch counter. But here, in the center of the world stage, he crouches into starting blocks. The crowd settles. High above, Adolf Hitler watches from his private box. The starter raises the pistol. For a moment, the stadium is perfectly still, because everyone believes they already know how this story ends. The gun fires, and in 10 seconds, the entire narrative begins to unravel. Not with a speech, not with a protest, not with defiance shouted into a microphone. With footsteps, fast, controlled, unarguable footsteps. The man they didn't expect to win crosses the line first, and the stadium, the one built to prove him inferior, has no choice but to cheer. That man was Jesse Owens, and over the next few days he would win not one, not two, but 4 gold medals in a place designed to erase him. This is the story of what happens when propaganda meets performance. This is the story of what happens when ideology meets undeniable reality. This is the night a runner outran hate. Let me tell you what happened next. The 1936 Summer Olympics were held in Berlin, Germany. Now here's something people forget. Berlin was awarded the Games before Hitler fully revealed what he intended to do with Germany. But by 1936, the Olympics had become a showcase, an international stage, where the Nazi government could present its vision of a new Germany to the world. The stadium, huge, imposing, could hold tens of thousands. Flags and banners filled the scene. The atmosphere wasn't neutral, it was charged. And the idea the Nazis pushed, loudly, was that the Aryan ideal was destined to dominate. So picture the tension. The world's athletes arrive. The world's press arrives. and Germany wants the world to leave impressed and persuaded. That's what made Jesse Owens so dangerous to that message. Not because he made speeches, because he made results. Jesse Owens was born in 1913 in Alabama, in a world shaped by segregation and limited opportunity. His family moved north during the Great Migration, and he grew up in Ohio. People would later talk about him like he was inevitable, like greatness was always going to happen. But it didn't feel inevitable while he was living it. Even as a rising star at Ohio State, he experienced discrimination in basic, everyday ways. Where he could eat, where he could stay, where he could live. He could represent his country, but his country didn't always fully accept him. And that contrast, being celebrated publicly while still being boxed in privately, would follow him even after the Olympics were over. Before Berlin, before the gold medals, Jesse Owens had one of the most unbelievable afternoons in track and field history. May 25th, 1935, at the Big Ten Championships in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Depending on the telling, it's 3 world records and a tie, or 5 records and a 6th equaled. What's consistent is the core miracle. He produced a once-in-a-century performance in about 45 minutes. Here's the shape of that day. He tied the world record in the 100-yard dash. He set a world record in the long jump. He broke the world record in the 220-yard dash. He broke the world record in the 220-yard low hurdles. And one detail I love, because it makes him human. 2 weeks before that meet, he reportedly injured his tailbone in a fall and wasn't even sure he could compete. Then he got on the track and said the pain miraculously disappeared. That's the kind of story Grandpa likes. Not because it's magical, but because it reminds you that legends still wake up sore, nervous, uncertain, and then do the thing anyway. By the time Berlin arrived in 1936, Jesse Owens wasn't just good. He was the most dangerous kind of athlete, the kind who could ruin your narrative. Now we arrive in Berlin, August 1936. And the first major moment for Owens is the 100 meters, the race people call the purest test of speed. Owens wins the Olympic 100-meter final in 10.3 seconds. And I want you to understand what that meant in that stadium. A black American athlete, under the eyes of Nazi leadership, becomes the fastest man in the Olympics. You can argue politics. You can argue ideology. but you can't argue the finish line. The stadium had to accept what it saw. And from that moment on, everything got more tense. Because now the world was watching Jesse Owens, and the Nazis had to decide what they were going to do with the fact that their biggest symbol of superiority was being challenged in their own showcase. The long jump is where the story turns from amazing athlete into timeless legend. Because it isn't just about the jump. It's about the moment around the jump. Owens wins long jump gold in Berlin with a leap of 8.06 meters, an Olympic record. But here's what made it dramatic. He was under pressure, and the competition was real. A German athlete named Luz Long, tall, blonde, and talented, was his top rival. And what's endured for generations is the image of the two of them together, mutual respect in a place built to reject it. The specifics of their interaction are sometimes simplified by pop history, but the core truth is solid. Owens and Long showed open sportsmanship and friendship at an Olympics run as a propaganda showcase, and that friendship became one of the lasting symbols of those games. Years later, Owens described how much that friendship meant, saying it took courage for Long to befriend him in front of Hitler, and he delivered one of the most famous lines tied to their story. It took a lot of courage for him to befriend me in front of Hitler. You can melt down all the medals and cups I have, and they wouldn't be a plating on the 24-karat friendship that I felt for Luz Long at that moment. That's not a quote about athletics. That's a quote about humanity. And if you want Grandpa's rainy night energy, that's exactly it. Because Grandpa's stories aren't only about who won. They're about who you become while you're trying to win. And it's worth knowing what happened to Luz Long, too, because it adds gravity. Long later served in the German military and died during World War II. So when you picture that moment, two athletes walking together, respected together, you're watching a brief, bright flash of decency in a time that was about to become very dark. Next comes the 200 meters. This is a different kind of race. Not just raw top speed, but controlled speed around a curve, like holding your nerve while the track bends under you. Owens wins the 200-meter final in 20.7 seconds, setting an Olympic record. And that performance is also widely listed as world record caliber for that era. And another detail that makes the story richer. The silver medalist in that 200 meters final was Mac Robinson, brother of Jackie Robinson. So within the same Olympic moment, you're seeing threads of future American sports history crossing paths. Owens now has 3 gold medals, in Berlin, under that propaganda spotlight. And at this point, the world has to understand something. This isn't an accident. This isn't a lucky day. This is dominance. Now we get to the 4x100 relay. Owens ends Berlin with a 4th gold medal as part of the U.S. relay team. And they win in 39.8 seconds, a world record at the time. But this is where the story becomes complicated. 2 Jewish American sprinters, Marty Glickman and Sam Stoller, were removed from the relay lineup shortly before the event. Owens and Ralph Metcalfe were inserted, joining Foy Draper and Frank Wyckoff. And that last-minute switch became controversial because it raised questions about politics, favoritism, and whether anti-Semitism played a role. Now, as Grandpa, I'm not going to pretend we can read every mind from 1936. But I'll tell you what we can say. The switch happened. The 2 Jewish runners did not get to compete. The relay team still won easily and set a world record. And the decision became part of the moral complexity of America's participation in those games. So when you tell this part in your video, don't rush it. Let it sit the way real history sits, messy. Because Grandpa stories work best when you don't polish the truth into a fairy tale. Owens' Olympics had beauty in it, and also hard edges. That's real. You've probably heard the classic line, Hitler refused to shake his hand. The truth is more nuanced. A widely supported explanation is that Hitler initially congratulated only German winners, was told by Olympic officials that he had to either congratulate all medalists or none, and then stopped doing public congratulations at the venue. Owens himself later described that he and Hitler exchanged waves, and he pushed back on the idea that Hitler personally singled him out for a snub. But here's the emotional core, what Owens remembered most. Owens said he felt snubbed not by Hitler, but by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. One famous quote attributed to Owens, reported in reputable historical summaries, goes like this: Hitler didn't snub me. It was Roosevelt who snubbed me. The president didn't even send me a telegram. And Britannica notes Roosevelt never publicly acknowledged Owens' triumphs, and that in 1936, only white Olympians were invited to the White House. That detail hits hard, because it means this: Jesse Owens could go across the ocean, win 4 gold medals in the most politically loaded Olympics in modern memory, and still come home to a country that often treated him like an inconvenience. That's not a small footnote. That's the emotional ending of the story. Owens did receive public celebration. New York City held a ticker tape parade in his honor in September 1936. And if you've ever seen ticker tape footage, you know what it means. The city saying, "You're one of us. You're a hero." But even then, the country couldn't fully step out of its own shadow. There are multiple credible references noting that at a reception at the Waldorf Astoria, Owens was forced to use the freight elevator rather than the main entrance or passenger elevators because of segregationist treatment. Think about the symbolism. Confetti in the streets and a freight elevator at the end of the night. That's America in 1936 in one image. If you're building your script for maximum emotional impact, this is one of your strongest rainy night scenes. Grandpa can describe the parade, the cheering, the paper fluttering down like snow, and then lower his voice and say, "And when the cameras were gone, they sent him to the freight elevator." And you let the listener feel the contradiction. Another thing people assume is that Olympic glory equals lifelong comfort. Not then. Owens struggled financially for periods after the Games. And one reason is that the world of endorsements and sponsorships we know today didn't exist the same way, and racism narrowed opportunities further. Owens did exhibitions to earn money, including racing against cars and even horses in staged events. That detail can sound almost unbelievable to a modern viewer, but it's real, and it underlines how little support even the greatest athletes could expect, especially black athletes, once the spotlight moved on. Later in life, Owens found more stability, became a public speaker, and served in roles that made him a kind of ambassador for sport. He eventually received major recognition: the Presidential Medal of Freedom, 1976, and a posthumous Congressional Gold Medal, 1990. But there's a long stretch between 1936 and that later recognition. And if your goal is to tell a story that feels honest, you don't end it at the podium. You end it in the years after, because that's where the real meaning settles. Now let's be careful here, because history deserves precision. People sometimes say Jesse Owens single-handedly destroyed Nazi ideology. That's a powerful line, but it's not literally true. The Nazi regime didn't collapse because of a track meet. Owens didn't end racism in America by winning medals. History is heavier than one hero. But what he did do, undeniably, was puncture the illusion on the world stage. He forced an uncomfortable truth into the spotlight. When you claim superiority as destiny, and then a man you claim is inferior becomes the star of your global showcase, your ideology looks fragile. Not because someone argued against it, because someone outran it. And that's why this remains one of the greatest sports stories ever told. So here's what I want you to picture, just for a moment. A stadium built like a monument. A stadium meant to broadcast a message of dominance. Tens of thousands watching, cameras rolling, a world holding its breath. And then the gun fires. And all that propaganda, all that noise, all that certainty gets chased down by one thing: footsteps. Fast, clean, rhythmic footsteps on a cinder track. And for a few seconds, the world doesn't argue. The world doesn't debate. The world doesn't rationalize. The world just watches. Because truth has a way of doing that. Not the truth of politics, the truth of what happened. Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals in Berlin: 100 meters, long jump, 200 meters, and the 4x100 relay. He did it in a place that didn't want him to be the hero. He came home to a country that still made him take the freight elevator. And somewhere in the middle of all that contradiction, he left us one of the most enduring images in sports history. A man running so fast that history had to keep up. Good night, and I'll see you next time on another rainy night.